Welcome back to 20 Side Adventures. We're going to be continuing my tier list, this time starting with Accessory Runes, and then towards the end, I'm going to have a conversation with you guys around narrative versus heavy rules systems and how maybe narrative and heavy rules don't have to be so mutually exclusive and how you can use some of this to build your adventures. Also, we'd love a like and a subscribe if you like what we're doing here on the channel. And with that, let's get right into it. Alright, we're going to jump right into it here. Reinforcing runes, must have for your shields. You can put them in your magic shields now. Just lets that shield block get a little more hardness and last a little longer so you're not getting a destroyed shield. Menacing, this goes in your clothing and it gives you a bonus to coercion. I don't think that's useful for all builds. If you're a character that's running Intimidate and you're really leaning into that, this can be a useful way to be around town and get a bonus to your coercion checks. Could also see this being incredibly useful for characters in a criminal underworld or enforcers, because you just seem that much more menacing. So some good thematics, but for most player characters, I don't think it has great value, but middle of the road if it's the right build for you. Presentable, this is the opposite side of menacing. This gives you a bonus when you are having those diplomacy interactions with NPCs, but more importantly, this also gives you prestidigitation for that particular piece of clothing. And as a world building thing, I can imagine most, if your NPC characters, even commoners in towns, probably have their finest bit of clothing having a presentable rune on it because it's not that costly. Called. So this one's really interesting. There is a weapon rune called and an accessory rune called. The weapon one is by far better, but there is nothing preventing you from putting a called rune on your weapon, and it doesn't take a rune slot because accessory rune slots are separate. Now, there's a lot of caveats. If you have a weapon that is invested, you can't put an accessory rune on it. But there's a lot of situations, if you have a common weapon, where you can use the accessory rune called. It doesn't take away from your other runes, and it gives you a little bit of a benefit. Again, not as good as the weapon rune called, but if your weapon's unattended 30 feet away, or you have a secondary weapon in a bag that you want to be able to use frequently, could be a good option. Snagging, C tier, it lets you grab an edge when you're falling, even if your hands are tied up. Very situationally useful. I don't think it's a great buy for most people. However, soft landing is a great item that you could put into any of your common equipment. It gives you feather fall, so while you may not be able to stay up at the top of the building with the snag, you're not going to splat when you hit the ground. So I think that's a great rune to pick up for your accessories. Unexceptional. I love the concept of this rune. D tier though, because you can't use it on anything you'd want to use it on. Unfortunately, accessory runes can't go into anything that's invested, so the vast majority of magical items that you probably want to not be noticed by people, you aren't going to be able to add this. If it's something that's magical but not invested, it hides the magical aura, and it can be useful for some smuggling. Or if you just have something that's super valuable that you're trying to not display as valuable, so that's maybe a bit more of a story use. But I really feel for what this rune tries to do, the accessory rune rules just make it not possible. Dragon's Breath, C tier, possibly good if you're a caster. It gives you the free action Widen, and I do like anything that gives you a free action. It's just very narrow because it has to be the type of element that the rune's dragon is tied to. So it just gets narrower and narrower how you can use this. Paired, so this one's kind of fun. It has to be an invested item, which is kind of weird how that works with the accessory rune rules, but it lets you pull something out of your pocket that was in your friend's pocket if they're a paired item. I can see how this could be useful in certain situations and with certain magic items, maybe that the party wants to share and isn't someone's use all the time item. So definitely some good uses for that, but not a must-have, middle of the road B tier. Retaliation. Another, if you have the slots for it and you have room in your shield, so if you're not taking reinforcing, maybe you're taking retaliation. Though actually reinforcing isn't an accessory rune, so you could take both of these. Retaliation lets you once per day, when you shield block, hit back an opponent with a force blast. I think it's a great option, and it's a free action, so anything that gives you extra actions I think is a great take. Wind Catcher, D tier, because it only applies to vehicles. So super situational if you're doing a pirate campaign or anything that involves a boat or a sand skiff or something wind powered. Wind Catcher. An interesting world building item again. I don't see why most ship captains, most ships that are serious in your world, if it's not just a small fishing ship and is going long distances, is going to have this rune. So when you're building your economies with some of these things, keep this in mind that these tools are available in the world, not just to adventurers. So how does it impact the common person and everyday activities inside your world? Catching, I think this one is pretty solid. It lets you have a free action disarm when you shield block. I think I like retaliation better, but I could see where catching is a good take, maybe by a swashbuckler. And then also, if you have the disarming shield block feat, you do get just a static +1 to it. So pretty good if you're going that build route. And pontoon lets you walk on water. Seems really weirdly situational to me. If you're in a campaign with lots of water, could be useful. The average adventurer, I don't think it's a great choice. Spell Bastion, I'd put this one higher than I think I probably wanted to because I could just see other play styles that would like it. For me personally, having to spend an action to ready the Spell Bastion and then block with the shield to get the spell release just seems so cumbersome. But if you are a fighter that has no magic and you have a really good spell stored in there from your mage friend in the party from the day before, I could see where it could be kind of useful. I just think catching and retaliation are much better choices for most melee characters that have a shield. And last, I put preserving at the end because it is leading into my larger conversation. D tier, though, because I just don't see where adventurers are going to need to worry about it. If your table really tracks the survival aspect, this is a much higher take. Heck, S take if you're going to really be following rations and you're in the wild or your game just revolves around that. Definitely higher rank. I think for most tables, I've never seen anyone really track the rations too seriously, or at the very least, do you have enough? Not did they spoil and the timing on that kind of thing. So I think it's a really cool something to world build that we're going to get into. But for your general accessory take, I don't think it's that great of a take. All right, we're going to now jump into the larger world building conversation.
All right, so the discussion around narrative and rules heavy, and while I tend to favor a rules heavy system because I don't think it detracts from the narrative, I approach this as the rules are the physics of everything around you. So we're going to just look at the preserving rune here, right there. 45 gold, level 3. So what that means is in a town of level 3 or higher, which if we look at the settlement rules is somewhere between 400 and 2,000 people, it is likely you could find this type of magical item there. And for 45 gold, someone can have a refrigerator. Yep, your common folk can have wherever they store their food where it won't spoil for prolonged periods of time. We have magical refrigerators thanks to this rune existence, right? And we know exactly how it works. So, what can your common person afford? Well, right here, we're going to have hirelings. So the unskilled is someone who has no training and is just moving heavy things for you. They don't do anything else for you. And the skilled hireling is an expert in a specific skill, but they don't have any levels. So to me, this screams apprentice or someone who's just getting started in the economy of your world. Now, what does that get them? So if we look here, we have cost of living in Pathfinder. You will see a comfortable living standard is 1 gold per week. These guys are making 5 silver a day. They're making 2.5 gold per week, maybe 3 if they're working 6 days a week, which could be a thing in your setting. Or, it depends how many weeks you have, which also, if your world has fewer days or weeks, adjust these numbers accordingly because they are designed around Galorian's calendar. Okay, so at 2.5 gold a week, you only need 1 gold to cover your basic expenses. You're putting 1.5 gold away to go buy a preserving rune. 45 weeks later, a little less because you're getting 1.5. Boom, you have a preserving rune in your home at a level 3 village. This seems like a pretty good way to decide what kind of the economy of your world looks like. What are the basic interactions with people? How common is magic? So if you're using these basic rules, it's not inconceivable to believe that most common folks all have preserving runes in their house and on their cupboards, maybe even a couple of them. Now, the next interesting one is if we look at the greater preserving rune. 450 gold, so definitely outside the reach of most common folks, but food does not spoil. Okay, so you put it in the box, the food is good forever as long as that magic rune survives. This is something that your towns and your villages and your settlement infrastructure probably are spending some money on. What great way to stave off famine than having perfect food preservation for whatever you grow. Now, as the game master, you have the avenues of story hooks. Someone has tampered with the greater preserving rune on the village storehouse. We're going to lose the harvest. Well, that's everything we have stored up. You have so many days to get into the next town over to find a new rune or figure out how to remove it. Militaries, armies on the march are going to be using these. Food storage wagons in advanced militaries that they just don't lose any of their food when on campaign. Yeah, that is something that would be used. So if you're going to attack the enemy, maybe you need to go after the logistics. You damage the runes on their wagons that are carrying food supplies. All of these things make sense and exist because you're in a system where the physics are clearly explained. Yes, all of these scenarios can be dreamt up in a narrative story play without the rules. You are 100% correct. But the consistency of being able to granularly build from the bottom up because you have a well-defined system, make sure everything makes sense, and it can plug and play with other tables that use the same system, and it creates wonderful world building. On this one also, we have the presentable rune, 50 gold. So your common folks are probably also saving up for some presentable runes to put on their finest pieces of clothing because the clothing was expensive, and now that clothing is good pretty much forever because prestidigitation is awesome. So this is also something that is likely very common, especially among your nobility and your wealthy. I would assume everything has a presentable rune on it. So yeah, think about these things. I also think world building and homebrewing for the accessory runes is a wide, untapped space to go into. I would love to hear if you have homebrewed any accessory runes and what they are, because I am fascinated by what these simple things can do for the common person in your world, and then how your players can use them. So like and share, put it in the comments, let me know what your homebrew accessory runes are, and we will see you next time on 20 Side Adventures.